Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm here with my brother Daniel. This is Rolls in the Family, and today we are going to be counting down each of our top 3 board gaming plays of April 2023. We will be including links to all the games we talk about in the description below if any of them look interesting to you. Also, we'd love to hear what games you've been enjoying lately.
Yep.
So if you want to drop in the comments, your top play from the last month and what made it the top play for you. It's fun to see more than just our picks and be able to engage with you a little bit. I'm coming off of being sick here a little bit. I know Daniel's been pretty busy lately.
It's been a crazy month, but that doesn't stop us.
Yes, we know our priorities to be here to talk about board games.
That's right.
I've got tea if I have a coughing fit, but we're going to make this happen.
That's right.
Let's jump right into it. Unlike last month, where we did game a decent amount together, this month had none of that. We went our separate ways. So there's not going to be any direct crossovers here unless we played the same game separately. We'll see.
Teaser?
But I'm going to pass it to Daniel first for his number 3.
Yeah, so it's funny. I was playing a game with a couple last night, and he started watching our videos. And now, Ryan, I'm feeling this pressure of if I don't include a play of people that we play with, they're going to be disappointed and be like, "What the heck? Did you not have fun?" And I was like, "Oh, don't worry." He didn't make the play, so sorry. He knows who he is. But we did have.
I just tell my friends, if you're not in the video, just know it's probably you.
It's
You're probably the reason. I love this game.
Yeah,
so.
It's definitely not the game. I gave it a 9 out of 10. So come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So my number 3 play of April 2023 is going to go to Wingspan. So Wingspan, we both own, again, one of the few games that I actually owned before you. And I think you played my copy, right? And then played it yourself.
Yep, we played it in a hotel room. That was my first.
Oh, we did. That was
play
on a tiny little table in between beds.
Yeah.
Oh, the good old days, aka last summer. Wingspan, we played it with my wife's family. We were on a trip there and played it out on a ping pong table. And got to teach, it was my wife and I obviously have played it before, but then taught 2 new people and her siblings, and really just a really fun game. It was tight. I think what's really fun about Wingspan is that there is a lot of different strategies that you can kind of lean into in that game. For example, this game that I was playing, I just had a ton of birds that were like kind of the scavenger where you tuck card. They have the kind of the tuck card ability. So I'm just going all out tucking cards like crazy. And then I can't remember if it was my wife or one of her siblings that was just tons of eggs. I mean, it's a game that, there's so many different things you kind of got to take into consideration. The end of round scoring, the cards that you have, the order that you do actions and what's in the bird feeder. And there's kind of a lot of these things you're kind of trying to bring it all together. But what I love about Wingspan, and the reason I recommend it to a lot of people, is how accessible it is with all of that. One of the people playing doesn't usually like heavier games, but what's really cool about Wingspan, I think, is it limits the actions, to just 4 different actions. That's something I love in games is when it's a strategic game, but the actual choices are fairly simple. And I don't know if that's a common thing in Stonemaier games, if that kind of concept of just simple options amidst kind of this more complex system. But what that ultimately does is it allows people who don't like strategic games to maybe step into it a little bit easier because you can kind of just narrow the focus down. I love Wingspan because I think it's just the perfect stepping stone for someone, if you've played like Ticket to Ride, Catan, and you're kind of looking for just kind of what's the next step. I feel like Wingspan fits fits that so well, especially if you like birds. If you like birds, if you're a bird watcher.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
it is true. Like, it's got a very accessible theme. Like, whereas people might get put off by like a more medieval, like fighting theme or some of these things, like it's really accessible. It is, besides being like pretty simple actions, there's also just like intuitive systems of like each of the rows in your habitat kind of work the same way. It's like, this one you're taking actions with the food, and then this one is eggs, and this one is cards, and like the way they scale as you play more birds is very, very similar. So it's not like a lot of upfront cognitive load. Like, it mostly comes from reading the bird effects. And I think that's where it does kind of step up into like beyond some of those kind of gateway games. And there's, people that I know probably wouldn't like it because that's a little bit more than what they're looking for.
Right.
But at the same time, I think you're totally right that for people that like are looking for something in that category, it's a really good fit. And the presentation is just like killer.
Oh,
I mean, it looks so good, and just like it's just it's an easy like product to recommend for that niche, just like holistically. So yeah, I did end up buying it after or getting it as a gift after playing it with you. And I agree. I enjoy it a lot. We enjoy other games that are in that vein of like lots of unique cards, and you're getting the cards and deciding, how do I make these work together the best, or which ones should I use and not use. And yes, like there's a certain amount of like luck that comes into a game like that because you're going to have random card draws, but it's fun. It's fun to get a bunch of different cards and figure out what to do with them.
Right.
So
the bird,
there's a good reason Wingspan's so popular.
Yeah. It's so funny because the presentation, you could argue it's meaningless, but I actually think it's so important. Even just like the bird feeder, you could have just rolled the dice, and yet there's something so just pleasing about rolling those dice down the bird feeder, tying in the theme. Really, really love presentation, gameplay, and yet just how accessible it is. So that is my number 3, Wingspan. Ryan, let's pass it over to you.
I am going to come in at number 3 with probably the least accessible game that we're going to talk about today.
I almost want to guess.
Least accessible.
What would Ryan say is the least accessible? I have no idea.
It's not a very accessible game. It's only my second time playing it, and I hadn't played it in about 6 years or something like that. My initial play had been with some colleagues, but I now actually had the opportunity to pick it up myself and play it with my own gaming group, and that is Root. And Root is a highly asymmetrical, kind of very interactive area control style game of woodland creatures, where when I say highly asymmetrical, it truly is like we are playing a 4-player game. Each of the 4 players is playing a completely different way from everybody else. You've got the cats that start all over the map and are trying to build buildings and produce wood to build more, and it's like, expand in just industry. And then you've got the birds that are like programming their own decree to take actions like programmed out, and if ever they can't take them, they overthrow their leader and go into turmoil, and they're trying to like take back the forest from the cats. And then you've got the Woodland Alliance that's like all the little critters that are trying to like put sympathy out in the clearings to like gather up the little people so they can start a revolt and like start actually doing things. And then I myself was playing the Vagabond, which is just like a single raccoon that just like goes around basically doing his own RPG and like interacting with the different factions. And it's just very complex because not only are the 4 so different in how they play, but it's the type of game that's very like self-balancing. Like, it's a race to 30 points, but you have a lot of ways to attack other players or influence other players. And so, for it to be self-balancing, all the players have to understand when another faction is doing well. But it's not very clear if you don't know the factions very well. Like, is the Vagabond doing well right now? Is the Woodland Alliance, that all they've done is like put out sympathy at this point? They haven't like done any revolts. They don't even have any people on the map. Like, how well are they doing relative to the cats that are like everywhere right now? So that's where it's really challenging. And I went into it having I learned it really well. So I felt like because I was teaching it, and I was like, I really need to teach this well. And it is the type of game that when you play it the first time, most of any new players are probably going to come out of it feeling like, yeah, that was really interesting. I didn't really know what you guys were doing over there, but and you lose a certain amount of the enjoyment of the game when you don't deeply understand what's happening around the table. All that said, I thought it was a very fun first play, and it ended up being a close game. I was kind of running away with it as the vagabond, but then, the rest of the table kind of realized that, and there was a round where they realized my next turn I was going to win, and all three of them confronted and attacked me enough that with the vagabond, if you get your health is essentially your items that let you take actions. So as I took hits, I had to flip a bunch to the point where I didn't have enough left to do my winning move. So I had to retreat into the forest and regroup to be able to do it. And then my friend that was playing the cats, he almost got to 30 in the turn after that. And then out of nowhere, my friend that was playing the Woodland Alliance completely came back 15 points down. And it's an example of, I don't think we at the table realized that faction was capable of that. But the Woodland Alliance has this interesting thing that once it gets little units out, they can go into sacrifice that unit in a clearing to place sympathy in the clearing. And sympathy is the main way that faction gets points. And so he was able on his last turn to move a bunch and just sacrifice him for sympathy, and he just got a ton of points for it. And so now we all know that and would be more aware of that.
Okay.
But we all ended, I think it was 30, 29, 28 for the top three players. So it was interesting and close.
Yeah.
I think it really makes my list this month, mostly because I, for a long time, wanted to play it again and play it with my own group and kind of better understand the game. And so it was fun to get to experience that. I still feel like I don't know how I feel about the game as a whole, because it's the type of game that you need to get to that point where you have a group that already knows how to play it.
Yeah.
And has that understanding. And that's where the game's going to thrive. It's also a game similar to something like Twilight Imperium, where it's going to be, it's very much keeping everybody in check, right? And ultimately who wins isn't necessarily who played the best in the game.
Right.
We're all jockeying for position, and eventually someone's going to merge out, but it's the interest of jockeying for position that's fun about the game. I feel like that's how Root is. You can't focus too much on who's going to come out as the winner, because there is that kind of the tear down the leader, but it's such an interesting sandbox to play in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it ended up being, a good play. I'm interested to play it again, but it makes my number 3 of the month.
No, yeah, I'm really excited to try that one. I'm curious, did you feel you played it once, but I feel like a big thing with asymmetrical games is that even though what you're doing for each player feels very different, that it doesn't feel like, I'm curious, did it feel that faction feels a lot more powerful than this one, or did it feel like it was pretty balanced? I mean, in some ways it can be okay if they're not balanced because of that table dynamic that you were talking about.
Yeah.
You can, team up and stuff. So I don't know if they felt really balanced and tight, or if it was more of a reliance on the table dynamic in the game.
I mean, it does rely on the table. I think ultimately, it's gonna be balanced because you have so much ability to affect any of the 4 factions. If you know that any of the 4 are doing well, you know how to slow them down, or you have the ability to know if you understand everything that's going on. And yeah, so when I was doing really well, the way to hurt the vagabond is you have to go confront him and attack him. But there's, for each of the other ones, it's going to look a little different as far as what's important for you to be doing to slow them down. So it'll be interesting to see, because it is this game in my collection that it isn't going to see the table often unless I'm getting it with these repeat groups. But I just am interested to see with those repeat groups, does it end up providing this experience that's worth the effort that you're putting into the game?
Yeah.
And I guess the final verdict is still out on that. But I had fun playing it, and it's a fascinating game. There's not a lot like it.
That's awesome.
But let's go on to number 2. onward and
keep it
upward.
rolling. Number 2, I got to give credit to Ryan. Well, actually, I don't know if I should credit you. You tend to fuel my unhealthy buying new board games habit. A little background of my number 2 play is I stroll into a board game store, go to the ding and dent section, and I just start snapping pictures of the whole wall.
This is the story of my
whole
life.
wall, and say, Ryan, what is good? What should I buy? Because Ryan,
I'm just like in the middle of my work day, and then it's like, here's a collage of an entire game store. Well, I was like, any of these good? It's like,
Ryan has an even deeper knowledge than I do.
I'm like zooming in on this to see if there's any.
But thankfully he did, because I was able to pick up my number 2 play, which was Ultimate Railroads. Got that for a good deal off the ding and dent.
It's right behind your head right now. I can see
Ultimate, yeah, I know. I should just, like, as I say it, like Ultimate Railroads. There we go.
Yeah. Smooth.
Yeah, so this is the kind of, I guess, I don't know, would you call it the, like, deluxe edition of Russian Railroads? Is that
It's the ultimate edition. It's a game that's been out of print, really, for a long time, but they finally did this huge new edition that's, like, the game with every expansion and even new content that wasn't out yet. So it's a ton of stuff in there.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the first thing that blew my mind. Was there's just all these different modules, and the storage solution is really cool because it kind of has each module you kind of can lift out of the box, and it's in its own like separate kind of section, which is really cool. But I had to first see if I even liked the original game before you get into any modules. So my wife and I played that, and really, really fun. I mean, it was funny because we were playing it first, and it's actually a really simple game in terms, like, it's not that complex. It's just your kind of worker placement, playing your workers out here. You've got kind of a personal board with these 3 tracks that you're building these, kind of building the tracks of a railroad along, kind of upgrading them. And then you need to get trains to kind of help actually get points based off how far you are on those railroads. So we were kind of going along. We're like, okay, worker placement here. I don't really know if I'm doing that good. And for both of us, there hit this point in the game where there's a lot of things that you get to a certain point and it unlocks or you trigger you now get this. And we hit a point where suddenly it was like, oh my goodness, I get this. Oh, and that's going to give me this. And oh my goodness, and it just it was like steam, it just started steamrolling. So it was funny because the game only
like a train engine,
Ryan. Yes.
Oh man.
So it was crazy because the game only took, and this was our first time playing, and it only took us an hour and a half. And so the last 45 minutes, it just progressed super fast, and it was such an exciting feeling because you just felt like you were building this big thing up. But with the different tracks, you kind of have these different routes you can go, and so there's different options. I'm gonna have to play it again and try it with kind of these different modules. But just first impression, I mean, both of us walked away from it and we're saying, wow, that was a lot of fun. I always love when games, you talk about how long the game takes to play versus kind of the experience it delivers. And I mean, an hour and a half, I felt like I had played a 2.5 hour heavier kind of game, just with kind of the feel it gave me and all of the fun combos that it had. I'll be curious to see kind of how the replayability is. And I think the modules will help with that a lot because at least in the base game, I played it at the beginning of the month, so remembering all of the different things.
But I don't think there's a lot that changes.
I don't think there is
game
either.
To game.
Yeah,
but I think some of the expansion stuff helps because I remember when I was looking at it way back. It's been a game that's been on my radar for a long time. That was one of my concerns with it. But I remember that some of the expansions, there was German railroads and American railroads or something. I remember looking to those and being like, okay, I think this would help solve that concern for it.
Right.
So hopefully, I don't remember exactly what it adds.
I read through them a little bit. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. Some seem to be liked more by people than others, but I'm excited to try those. That was a fun one to get to the table. Thank you, Ryan, for getting me to spend more money. But Ryan, what is your number 2?
always good to hear that I got people to spend more
That's
money.
your just like
I'm definitely very, very interested in trying that one. Like I said, I haven't played it yet, and it's been on my list for a long time. It is a good engine building game, which is a great segue into my number 2, which I would argue is one of the games that gives me the strongest feeling of engine building of any game I have, as far as just like powerful, like what I'm building is making me more powerful throughout the game. And that is going to be Lorenzo Il Magnifico.
Snuck it in.
The game that, Daniel had to buy once he saw the cover of it. I was like, not. This has to be in my collection.
I thought for sure I was going to hate that game. When you pulled it out, I was like,
I always have to be the one to get you to try the games that aren't lookers. But let me tell you, Lorenzo has been a game that has rocketed up my personal rankings to the point where you and your wife also really enjoyed it and bought it.
It is. I'll just give you the floor. Take it away, Ryan. Wax
here we
on
go.
Lorenzo. Here we go.
It looks like just another Euro, right? Like it has that look of, what's so special about this versus all these other Euros that are out here. But it truly does have some things that really stand out to me. I mean, you're ultimately building up these rows that you're going to have the opportunity to execute. One of them like produces a lot of resources. One of them lets you do a lot of conversions. And so you're literally building like these 2 engines you can run. On top of that, you're getting character cards that give you abilities that are like ongoing, that like power up what you're able to do. And then because we play with the leader module and the expansion, we all get unique player powers, your house at the beginning of the game, which are just like insanely powerful. Like, I don't know many games that have as powerful of like asymmetric abilities as Lorenzo does. And so that's very fun. And then you're playing with the leaders that are these cards you draft that like once you have, 5 green cards, I can put this leader out and now I have that ability for the rest of the game. And it might be something I can do every round, or it might be, and some of those are insane. Like, one of the big things in Lorenzo is it's pretty tight with like the resources and everything, which is something we tend to enjoy in that type of game. And one of the things that's tight is money, because anytime you want to go to a tower, which is the main way you get cards, that someone, including yourself, is already in, you have to pay 3 coins. So like if you're low on money, it's like really hard to get much. I literally got a leader. Or no, I got it wasn't actually a leader. It was a card I got during the game. I don't know if it was it was probably a blue card. One of the people, but it made it so that for the rest of the game, I never had to pay that 3 coins. So like one thing gave me that, and that's like layering on top of everything. And so you're just like the power, you're like all of these things layered onto each other. It's just so fun. And the fact that it's done in a game that's like a tight worker placement Euro game, which is something that just like, I really like that. I like, we talk about, we both really enjoy Agricola. Just like put me in those chains and let me figure out how to work out of it. And man, Lorenzo, especially with all the expansion stuff, is just like, it's just so good. And I didn't end up winning this game. I had a very fun strategy though, because my house was one that, at the end of every round, there's 6 rounds in the game, and you kind of reset all the cards at the end of every round. At the end of each round, I can spend 7 servants, which are normally what you use to boost the value of your workers. Mm-hmm. And 7 is a lot. It's hard to get 7 servants. But I can spend 7 to take any card that's been left over, like that nobody took the round, and just build it for free. Like I don't have to pay any cost, anything, as long as I have my 7 servants. So my game is suddenly completely different, like in feel from other games, Lorenzo, because my focus is like, I got to have my 7 servants by the end, because like, that's just too powerful to give up on, especially because there's hugely powerful and expensive cards that get left behind because nobody was able to like pay for them. And I'm like, well, I'll just build that for free. But the thing is, for me to get 7 servants, I'm having to like use some of my actions just to get servants, like nothing else but to try to like get that. And it also means I can never use my servants, which normally you're using them to bump your workers to be high enough to go to certain places. And so it was such an interesting thing. But I ended up layering that with a strategy of I got a few things into my yellow production row that would give me council privileges, which are kind of like this wild resource where whenever you get a council privilege, you can get any of these things off a list. So it's very flexible of what it could be. One of those things being 2 workers. So that was kind of my thought here is like, okay, this will be a good way for me to like get workers in another way. But then I had a leader card that I played that whenever something gives me a council privilege or any number of council privileges, I get 1 more council privilege. So it turned out that I had 2 cards in that engine that gave me a council privilege. So now once I got that leader out, every time I ran it, I got 4 council privileges, which because I could pick the same one with that, like I didn't have a restriction of picking different ones, I could get 8 servants if I wanted to. And so that like really lessened the burden of like how I was going to get those. And it was just a fun, strategy that was very different from other things I've done in the game. And it is a game that, if there's one knock I have against it, it's like the game especially with the expansion, is rarely close at the end. Because it's so drastic, like the engine building and the abilities, that usually someone who's doing well, like, wins by 50 points, right? And
yeah.
So it just like the spread gets very like stretched out because of those differences. So I still lost by quite a bit to my friend that had, this very powerful strategy that he got tons of leaders and was scoring for how many leaders he had. But man, yeah, I just playing it again, it's really rocketed, like I said, up my rankings. It'll be interesting to see when I do top games this year, kind of where it lands for me. But it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
I feel the same way. I have been shocked how much I like that game. My wife too. I mean, we'll see with her top games. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a top 3 game for her. I mean, this game has just blown us away. I mean, if you like engine building and combos and engine building, I mean, this is literally just that,
and worker placement, which tends to be something people really enjoy.
Yeah. The one thing that I also really love about that game is, you roll the 3 dice every round, but that whole thing where it's for everyone. And so like, when you have a bad die roll in terms of rolling low, it's almost kind of fun because like the table feels the scarcity of
it's going to be really tight this round.
It's like,
or in our game. Yeah, I was going to say, in our game that we played, the final round, my friend rolled 666. So we literally had the highest roll we possibly could have. We were laughing because he had an ability that he every round could turn one of those 3 dice into a 6. So we were laughing because by rolling a 666, he like, he wanted to roll a 1 so that we are stuck with 1s. So it was very funny. But yeah, that last round, we're like, we can do everything.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just like, it's so different than the game we played with your wife, where I swear every time she didn't roll higher than 3 and we just are like, how are we supposed to do anything?
Yeah.
And you have to be okay. Like, some people don't like that, really clamping you down that much in a game. They want to be able to do more. But yeah, it is like very satisfying because it's you're trying to figure out how to make it work with what you're, the situation you've been put in. So I like it. I mean, it's a little rough when you don't get any good rolls like throughout the game. But it does add a nice layer of interest onto that with all players sharing that.
Yeah, that is good stuff.
Yep, good. So that's 2 engine builders in a row. And actually, with you, you had Wingspan, which I would argue is an engine builder.
Yeah, that's an engine builder.
Root is not an engine builder,
I wouldn't say. And neither is my number 1. Number 1, Ryan, sometimes there's board games out there that whenever you have the rare opportunity to play them, they just got to be your number 1 play of the month.
Yeah.
And the first, I think, duplicate, or first repeat number 1, I think.
Do we need to have a Hall of Fame?
Yeah, we need to have that'd be kind of cool, actually. Like a little like leaderboard of like, you get like points.
Yeah.
Whatever. But my number 1 play is my longest board game, Twilight Imperium 4th edition. For our longtime viewers, you'll know, I think it was the first video that this was my number 1 play, January video. Again, just
our long time viewers,
long time,
the OGs,
OGs of like the 6 people, including our mom. So
hi mom.
But this was such a fun game of Twilight Imperium. So we actually had a full 6 people this time, which was really great. And we still finished in 7.5 hours. So I know some people are like 7.5 hours, that's insane. But for Twilight Imperium, that's actually pretty good.
Yep. Good time.
And just to give you guys a taste of, I'm just going to highlight a couple of the moments that happen in this game. So we've got one of my buddies is coming out pretty strong again. And he gets to Mechatol Rex, that's the center here, and you get a victory point when you get there, which is huge. And he's kind of building up this army and whatnot. Well, we have an agenda come out, and the vote is either I can't remember the agenda exactly, but it was something like destroy the ships in Mechatol Rex, which was just like, oh my goodness, this guy's in the lead, like this is perfect. Or it was gonna like hurt the people around Mechatol Rex a little bit. And so the rest of the table were like, sweet. We just all come. He had a lot of influence because he was on Mechatol Rex, so he had, But we're like, if we band together, we can do it because we had plenty of influence to take care of it. And by the way, this was not my high of the game, as you'll see shortly. So the first 2 guys to my right are voting first, and so they commit a decent amount. And I know that we have 2 people following me before the guy that we're trying to destroy. And so I thought I was being smart by abstaining to like force the other 2 people to have to use their votes to swing it instead of me. But here's what happened. I abstained, and the guy who we were trying to destroy suddenly they were all mad, and then he like convinced them that I was betraying them, and that if they would swing the vote the other way, that he would then launch a full assault on my army because of the betrayal that I had done by not voting. And I was trying to like recoil from I realized the mistake that I had made, and I was trying to recoil, but they didn't believe me. Now, fortunately, I held off any type of assault on my home system, but that just gives you a little bit of a taste of the so much of Twilight Imperium is what's happening at the table with the diplomatic negotiations and stuff. And then later in the game, so one of the guys 2 to the right of me was building up this just massive army. I mean, he just has, his fleet size was unbelievable. I mean, he's just moving this mob of people, and he's moving them closer and closer to Mechatol Rex. And then the guy who was in Mechatol Rex ends up using his hero ability, which is the heroes are from the Prophecy of Kings expansion, which your hero is a one, you have to complete 3 objectives to unlock it. And it's a one-time use, and it's insane. And he ends up using his hero ability, which literally just blows up an entire tile and turns it into a supernova. So this other guy had moved his whole massive army on this one tile. And then my friend comes in and blows the whole thing up, turns it into a supernova. I mean, it was just an insane moment that nobody saw coming. And oh my gosh, Ryan, I want to play this game. I don't know when I would ever play it with you again, but
and it's been so long since I played. Like, I think it's been longer than any other game in my collection.
Yeah,
since I played. Well, and it's obviously a hard one to get to the table, and like I haven't gotten it to the table like post quarantine. So it's been a hot minute.
You really need a group that it's not just about winning. Like, it's not just about getting the victory points.
It's exactly what I said with Root, right?
Yeah.
Like, it so depends on, you enjoying just the interest of the situations and, like, how each of you is acting in those and the dynamics of it. It's like this category of games that I don't even know what I would call it, but it is so, like... It's all about, like, given a situation you're in right now, how do I jockey the best for my positioning in this very interactive game? And, like, everybody's trying to do that to end up, someone's going to pop out as the winner.
And the jockeying, it's not just gameplay jockeying. It's, like, it's everything you're doing in the... It's how...
Or even, like, convincing people you aren't doing well, right?
Yeah, or even...
the perceived, like
So me withholding from voting there, from just an objective standpoint, it really wasn't that big of a deal. They still could have won the vote. Like,
yeah.
But from the symbolic or the relational perspective, it was like, are you kidding me? You persuaded us to go all in on this, and then you withheld. And so it just, all of it comes together into an incredible experience. And if I can play it in 7.5 hours with a full 6 people, that fills a great spot in my collection to deliver moments like that. We actually did an evening game, so it was started at I was like,
you brave soul, starting TI4 in the evening.
Well, yeah, it works out better for wives and children who then can sleep for half the game. So but it was a really, really fun experience. First repeat of number 1 TI4. Ryan, is TI4 your number 1?
Well, while you were playing an almost 8-hour game with 5 other friends, I was playing my number 1 by myself.
Oh my
because
gosh.
It is actually a solo-only game, and that is Final Girl. Yeah, Daniel's not much of the solo gamer, and
what are you going to tell your friends, Ryan, when you tell them your favorite game was the one that wasn't with any of them?
Exactly. Yeah. I think we're learning something about me here.
I'm kidding.
I historically wasn't a solo gamer. And it wasn't until more recently with kind of life changes and kids and stuff, realizing okay, there's some opportunities where, by playing a solo game, I can get that board gaming fix a little bit in situations where I can't otherwise get together with people. And I found a few games that work well for that I enjoy. And Final Girl has been a really big one for me that has been filling that niche. It's essentially a horror game where you are the final, girl. It's very tropey, think kind of cheesy horror films. The different expansions cover all the different they're plays on a lot of these popular movies or whatever. But I think, thematically it's similar to something of what I enjoy from a game like Eldritch Horror or something like that, where it's kind of just the against the odds, bad things are happening, lots of variables, and how am I going to get out of it and, make something happen. But what's really nice is, one, the game is super modular. So every set has a location and a killer, and you can mix and match any of them. And because I have a lot of content for it, that gives me a ton of options. But then even within that, if you're playing the same one, there's decks of events that come out. The items are going to be seated differently. There's just so much kind of random variable setup within that, which just sings to my heart. Especially because it's the type of game that is very easy for me to get to the table.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to rely on anybody else to get to the table. And I typically play it in usually a half hour or less.
Wow.
And so with all this variety, I get to try a lot of the variety because it's not such a commitment to actually do it. But let's talk a little bit about this particular play, because I've played a lot of Final Girl and it hasn't shown up on this list yet. I was playing one of the new season 2 ones. I think it's the Wynyard Cottage or something. So it's this kind of lake house vacation home or something. So picture this home on a lake and it's nighttime, and the killer was the intruder. So the thing that's different with them is there's actually 3 different murderers on the map that are all coming to the cottage, and we're there having a party with a bunch of my closest friends.
Wow.
And I tell you, Final Girl can do a really great job of telling a cohesive story of what's happening, and it's very zoomed in to kind of what's happening. And so my initial event in this game was that the home actually had a security system. So that wouldn't always come out, but that came out for me, which meant that if I got into the house, as long as nobody left the house, I up to 3 times could prevent a killer from getting in. So it was 3, defense of keeping them out of the house. And so I was okay, I'll get in the house and get everybody in the house to the garage, which is the closest place to an exit. Because a big goal in the game is trying to get the civilians. I think they call them victims because, very often they are getting killed off. You want to get them to one of the exits on the map, because as you do that, you prevent them from getting murdered, for one. But two, you get to add them onto your little final girl card, and you play a different, pick which final girl you're playing. And once you get enough of those, well, when you get it, you get a bonus. So every time you get that, you get some kind of bonus. But once you fill it, you get to flip your final girl, and now you have the special ability for that final girl, and they all have different special abilities. So I'm getting them all in the garage, and I'm like, okay, we can wait for the security system, and then once they get in, I'm really close to just shuttle people to out, the driveway and get people out of here. And so I'm doing that, and while I'm out on the driveway, I find a scooter, and so I'm like, okay, that might be useful later for like some movement, but we'll see. And so then I go back in, and I end up in the garage finding like a fireplace poker. I'm like keeping that just in case for later. And then I'm going back into the house to rescue some more people. But at this point, the murderers are like getting in, and I'm realizing like this is terrible. Like they are going to end up coming to me, and I can't like defend against all of them. Like I could maybe defend against one of them. And so I'm like done for. Like I really thought there was like no way I could get out of it. But then I was like, the scooter is outside. And if I can get to the scooter, like I can outpace them. And then I had an event, but then I was like, and do what? Like outpace them, but eventually I have to attack them. Like I have to take these out. And I think at this point I was down to 2 killers. Like I'd gotten one of them in the house. But I was able to run through and get the scooter. And I'd had an event come up that, some other neighbor on the lake came in with his boat and like brought in some people off the lake and was like coming into the house. So he like walks into the house to be like, hey, you want to come out for a boat ride? And then he just gets like, he basically like bought me time to get through the door because he got killed like instead of me. Oh my gosh. But then this is a little violent.
My gosh, we need to put a rating for this lesson.
Yeah.
Ryan, the only guy who can recommend 2-player games for kids and horror.
Yes, game. We covered all here on Rolls in the Family.
Ryan's a one of a kind.
But this ended up being very key because there were new victims that came in off the lake that had been on the boat. And so I scooter all the way out to the boathouse. I go get them and come out with them. And then I'm able to run on the scooter, and the murderers prioritized going after those victims. So that was what I needed. I know it was like a really mean move by me. I basically
this is instilling horrible
them
morals.
Out. Yes, it is. I had to do what I had to do. But that was what I needed to buy me a turn, because like they'll attack them, and that allows me to go and attack one of them in isolation. And I was able to get far enough away that then when the other one got to me, and it just altogether, it was such an example of like something we tend to like in a lot of these cooperative games, of feeling like there's no way. Mm-hmm. But then like some of those variables in the game make you go, wait a second. With the scooter, I can actually get some outpacing it because those people came from the lake and are in the boathouse. Mm-hmm. Like I have, because like all the other victims were off the map. So they were just like targeting me. I was like, I can use them to, and it was this interesting puzzle that ends up, everything that you're doing, you can see the exact thematic story of what's happening, which can be very funny sometimes in instances like this.
Yeah.
So I'm like literally scootering around to like, run away from these murderers. But yeah, I think it was like just a prime example of, I've had a lot of good experiences with that game. This was one of the better ones in just like how big of a comeback it was and how kind of funny the story of what happened was. But yeah, it was a very fun play. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. I know you don't know like a lot firsthand. Obviously, we haven't played it together.
Yeah, so
unless I have you play it sometime, you're not gonna firsthand know.
No, we're all about good morals here over in the Daniel household. So we're not about that.
Yes.
No. So I'm curious with what kind of luck is it? There's not like dice? Is there dice? Is it a lot of dice rolling?
There are dice.
Or is it?
Yeah. So the main mechanism is you're spending time. You have cards in your hand that you can play. So like I might do a sprint card, and then that I'm going to have to resolve a horror roll for, which is usually just 2 dice. And 5s and 6s are successes, and 3s and 4s you can turn into a success by discarding 2 cards out of your hand. And then action has like, if you got 2 successes, you get the best version of the action. If you get 1 success, you get the normal version. If you get none, sometimes like if I'm trying to sprint and I get no successes, I can like actually get hurt, which again represents like you're trying to get away quickly and then you like, you know, tripped and fell or whatever. So there is a lot of randomness, like, which again, in this type of game is
what
perfect.
you want.
Like, cause that like, it fuels a lot of the exciting moments and what's happening. And there is a lot of strategy because you, at the end of every turn, your leftover time is what you use to buy new cards from all the ones that are available. So you're trying to think, what are the best cards for me to have for the next round, and kind of, you know, how much time do I save? You can also discard a card to get a time. So it's like, do I use this card or do I like discard some so I can buy more cards for next turn? So it is a very solid kind of interesting kind of mechanisms that you're using to interact with the game. But yeah, just the combination of the different maps and the different killers that all work very differently, and then the events that come up that are location specific. So each location has their own deck. So obviously the guy coming on the boat and dropping off the people is something that can happen in that location, but it's in a deck of like 10 event cards, and you usually only see maybe 1 to 4 in a game.
Wow.
So like, and it can really change like the feel of a game depending on one of these are in it. So yeah, if we have any solo gamers in our viewership or ones that think that might interest them, Final Girl is definitely one I recommend in my experiences. It's been a pretty hot game as far as it's one of the most popular solo only games.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a great fit for me. You know, being able to pull it out and play it in like 30 minutes. I can fit it in I don't need tons of time in an evening necessarily to get a game of it.
That's really huge. Yeah, it seems like it's kind of, you know, if you like the kind of Elder Tour, those. I mean, it seems like a game that I would really like if I liked solo games.
Yeah, and I know like there's no way you're gonna, you know, you even more than me like love the social aspect of board gaming, and you likely would play, you know, video games if you're going to be playing something on your own.
Right.
I don't know. There's something for me about the tactile board game experience that still just appeals to me a little bit over sometimes sitting down to play a video game.
Although even video games for me, it's usually always social with
true.
other people.
Yeah.
I actually have friends, so you know.
Yeah.
I actually like my friends is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Your friends don't lower the games on your list.
Yes,
you know, pull it down
as they clearly do for you. Well, if any of our friends are still watching, well, at least my friends are still watching because they once they heard you say that, they all left. Thanks for tuning in. That is our top plays for April. Like we mentioned, all the links to the games will be down below. And if you haven't already, let us know down below. What was your top play of this last month? We got some really fun ones in. I'd love to hear what you guys are all playing out there. Maybe we'll even hear some ones that we need to go try, Ryan. You know, there's always a whole sea.
I can always be convinced.
Ryan is an easily convincible. Actually, I'm the one that's easily convinced, as you can see by me just buying games off Ryan's command.
Yeah.
But thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys in the next video.